Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the People's School for Marxist-Leninist Studies. Our class tonight is going to be on the International Workers' Order, or also known as the IWO. So for tonight, we will be learning about the history of the International Workers' Order, its relation to the communist movement, organizing and culture in the IWO, and the destruction of the IWO and revival of its mass organizations. And we will start off with the origins of the International Workers' Order. You have the floor.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with this one. So the origins of the International Workers' Order actually comes from a mainly Yiddish and Jewish group of socialists that came from Eastern Europe, the Der Arbeiterring, or the Workmen's Circle. It was founded in the 1900s by Eastern European immigrants, and they were mostly Yiddish. They were social democrat, Jewish mutual aid organization. And this mutual aid is different from what we think now of like the anarchist idea of mutual aid. They had a lot of different like actual insurance benefits, like life insurance. They even had insurance for burials. They also had other things that we'll talk about. This was dominated by the members of the Socialist Party of America. That's Eugene Debs. And it was anti-Soviet, decrying Soviet judicial actions against the Socialist Revolutionary Party, and was affiliated with the Yiddish newspaper, The Forward. And then let's go ahead. So what happened, though, there was a split in the Workmen's Circle, which really takes place at the beginning of the founding of the Soviet Union. But here on February 22nd, a new executive committee was made, and communists were prevented from getting on the Credentials Committee that's in the Workmen's Circle. So in May of 1922, 22nd Conference of the Workers' Circle was held. And I guess they had two different factions, I suppose. One was against the Soviet Union. Those would have been the people from the Socialist Party, or more oriented towards them, and one against the Workers' Party USA and Yiddish Morgan Fahrenheit paper. And that Yiddish Morgan Fahrenheit paper, the Morgan Fahrenheit, would eventually be integrated in the CP USA, and they would release an English newspaper called Jewish Life. So a protest convention was held in June of 1922, and the National Executive Committee struck back and suppressed the left-wing faction, shutting down the Boston District Committee. And on October 11th, 1929, a national conference of minority groups of the Workmen's Circle was held and attended by 193 delegates from all around the country. And the left-wing faction then made the decision to leave the Workmen's Circle and start their own working class formation. And it's Freiheit. Origins of the International Workers' Order. So yeah, I guess you could say the more pro-Soviet faction formed the IWO. It was formed in 1930. It was founded by open members of the Communist Party USA, and Rubin Salzman would become the first general secretary, and William Weiner. Salzman became the first general secretary, and Weiner became the first president. So in the 1920s, the Communist Party operated language federations. They faltered as the decade went on, but the IWO took its place, albeit not being part of the party itself. And these were really based around the immigrant population that also joined the Communist Party, and they would be speaking their first language, which would not be English. Later, the IWO would form English sections. So they provided members with low-cost life insurance, published newsletters in different languages, and held community events for the different ethnic and cultural groups. And the order actually grew from 3,000 to 5,000 members at formations to 155,000 members at its peak in 1941. Real quick, here are some of the different sections. Now, this goes back and forth. These sections didn't all just appear at once. But, we had the Jewish People's Fraternal Order that was founded in 1930. And like I mentioned before, there were English sections. And those were usually the second generation immigrants that joined those English sections. There was a Czech Workers Society, Ukrainian American Fraternal Union, a Carpatho-Russian National Society, Hellenic American Brotherhood, Serbian American Federation, American Russian Fraternal Society, Slavic Workers Society. We'll see a lot of from them. A Romanian American Fraternal Society. We had the Italian Garibaldi American Fraternal Society, Hungarian Workmen's Sick Benevolent and Educational Federation. We had a Spanish Cervantes Society, Mutualista Obrero Puertorriqueña. I'm trying to work on my Spanish there, but that was also founded by a lot of Puerto Rican Americans. The Finnish American Mutual Aid Society and the Douglas Lincoln Society, which was an African American group. That would actually be formed later during after the Second World War. Okay, next we'll have Comrade Angelo, General Secretary Emeritus, read these sections about the language branches.
Beginnings of the IWO, the language branches. Following the founding of the CP in 1919, comrades focused on organizing in their ethnic fraternal organizations as a way of reaching immigrant workers. There were reasons immigrants might welcome communist support. The year of the Language Department report on the fraternal societies, 1926, saw bitterly contested strikes in the textile mills of Passaic, New Jersey, coal fields in Pennsylvania, while state police were deployed to suppress the strikers with tear gas and tanks. CP organizers in Passaic, New Jersey directed the strike seeking to prevent wage cuts and speed-ups. Slavic strikers in Passaic, New Jersey and the coal fields slighted strike-breaking police forces by referring to them as Cossacks. While Hungarian organizer Emil Gardos compared scabs, which are strikebreakers, to monkeys, to which the president of the Passaic Central Labor Union said, "If I were a monkey, I would shoot the man that compared me to a scab." The idea for a multi-ethnic, interracial, fraternal order was hatched within the language division of the Communist Party. Communist sympathizers split with the Jewish Workmen's Circle in 1930 and allied with the Hungarian Workers' Sick Benefit and Educational Federation and the Slovak Workers' Society, SWS, and other groups. They came together and they formed the IWO. By the late 1930s, 11 language branches existed within the IWO, and the Order's monthly magazine printed articles in all these languages, as well as English, to reach its multi-ethnic members. The virtues of amalgamation, the 1931 report argued, could be achieved, quote, without mechanically forcing the amalgamation, end quote, by working through ethnic fraternal organizations, end quote, carrying through this joining when the majority of the membership is really convinced that this is in their interest. And there you see a picture. This was in 1940. The American Russian Fraternal Society celebrated its 20th anniversary as well as the 10th anniversary of the IWO, which had amalgamated many pre-existing ethnic fraternal groups. The American Russian Fraternal Society was confident that a social democratic America was coming on the horizon. And this comes from archives. I want to mention that Arrow Park, where we had our Congress, the first one in 2016 and the third Congress. They also were part of the IWO. They were the American Russian Organization of Workers. Thank you.
So we will now stop for our first discussion round.
Why did it take from 1922 to 1929 for the new organization to form after the left wing split in 22? And
yeah, the Socialist Party was also set up what they called language federations.
Mm-hmm.
In 1917, there was a revolution in Russia. World War I had just ended. The Bolshevik section of the Socialist Party was supportive and recognizing Soviet Russia. The Social Democrats did not. Remember, the Social Democrats supported World War I. Don't forget that. They supported World War I. Every socialist in every country supported their country. So the socialists in Germany supported Germany in World War I. The socialists in the United States supported the US. That's how internationalists they were. So, which I'm being facetious, of course. So once the Russian Revolution came, then changes began in all the language federations. And it became so strong, the divisions over Russia to support communist Russia, Soviet Russia, that they split. That's the situation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Comrade Angelo.
Yeah, so a lot of this has a lot of parallel to stuff we're working on with Labor partner organization, Labor United Educational League, both for this month's class of the Harry Bridges School of Labor, as well as our Mid-Atlantic chapter was out yesterday at the Labor Day Parade, or Sunday, I should rather, at the Labor Day Parade put on by the American Labor Museum, also known as the Botto House. And this museum, it's called the Botto House because what is now the American Labor Museum was ground zero for a lot of these strike actions in Passaic County, New Jersey, starting with the 1913 Patterson Silk Strike, which was a strike, and like the 1926 textile strike as well, also within Passaic County, which was all Passaic County, was put on. The workers were mostly immigrants, and they came from many different backgrounds. Of course, as we heard here about the Slavic background, workers calling the cops Cossacks.
60 seconds.
And the Italian workers as well. Just if you want to hear more about some of this time period with these workers, join the Harry Bridges School of Labor tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Thank you, Comrade. And we will be having another slide in the ending announcements about it as well. It's going to be a good class. Go ahead, Comrade Angelo.
Remember, ethnic never left us. If you notice that when there are elections, bourgeois candidates go into the Italian neighborhoods. They go into the Jewish neighborhoods. They go into the Hungarian neighborhoods, the Russian neighborhood, the Polish, the Ukrainian neighborhoods. This is what they do. So ethnic never died. It stayed. For a long period of time after World War II, especially, before World War II, there was an attempt by ethnic people to have their children be very American. So they didn't even speak the language in the home. They forced their kids to speak English. My father was a product of that, and he told me these stories. He was first generation, born here, and they were more American. If you do some sociological studies, you'll notice second generation is an attempt to go back to their roots. A lot of second generation people want to know where they came from. So they go back to their roots. That's just something I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Angelo. All right, we will go on to our next section now. So the next section is how the International Workers' Order worked. Go ahead.
Life of the International Workers' Order. Number one, insurance programs. This is very important. Today, everybody has life insurance. Most people do, for their families when they pass on. Well, poor people couldn't afford it. So they got together and they got this thing where they set up their own insurance company, just of the workers. So the IWO provided a very low cost life insurance to its members initially. In the 1940s, they offered health insurance at the same low cost. The IWO operated medical and dental clinics. It was the only insurance at the time for coal miners that gave them the same benefits as other occupations. It was also the only insurance that gave Black Americans the same benefits as they gave the white workers. That's the big difference. And that whatever money that was made by the insurance went back into the policies to give money to the workers and services. At the bottom, you'll see two, I don't know what you call it, stamps. Let me explain to you too how this worked. Everybody had a book. And I remember this, I saw it at Arrow Park. The old timers showed it to me. And every month you would give, let's say, 20 cents. They would give you a stamp that you're registered. That's how they knew you were registered. Next.
Real quick on that, there were other insurances that I looked into. They also had unemployment and like sick. Like if they took the day off and your company wouldn't pay you, the IWO could provide an insurance so you could actually have a living wage for that day that you missed.
And that's the definition of what you mentioned before. That's the real definition of that word. What is it called?
Mutual aid.
Mutual aid. That's the real thing. The young people took that word and they just changed the definition of it today. Thank you. And this is the Declaration of Principles. It's hard to read this. Okay. This was adopted at the Third National Convention in 1935, I think. The International Workers' Order is a workers' fraternal organization. Now, that word fraternal is very important. It means it means brotherly, together. It provides its members with sick, which you just mentioned, disability and death benefits, as well as with medical aid and other forms of help. It accepted members irrespective of their sex, their nationality, their color, their creed, or their political belief. Workers' fraternal mutual benefits serve the purpose of meeting the problems of the economic insecurity that workers found in this country. But they cannot solve the problem. The IWO, therefore, considers it its duty as a workers' organization to aid all other of the workers' efforts to liquidate, to end their economic insecurity, which means capitalism. Now, this is an interesting picture. This is the International Workers' Order Knitting Circle at a luncheon in Los Angeles Cooperative Center, 1941. The women are knitting scarves, socks, and blankets to send in care packages to the groups in Europe fighting the Nazis in Europe. Interesting. So even something as simple as knitting, everything was done in a way that it became political. The workers depend for their living on wages, of course. They cannot get wages when they are not working, or when they're sick, or when they become too old, or otherwise they become disabled. Mutual aid supplies help in some way of the emergencies, but it cannot solve the problem completely. To solve the problem, the workers must make organized efforts for more effective economic security. And that's where a political party comes in, comrades. The workers need and must make continuous efforts to get decent wages, to assure an adequate standard of living as the only possible guarantee for their health and for their physical ability. The workers require and they must demand clean and safe working conditions in the shops, in the mills, in the mines, in the factories. The workers are entitled to the protection of effective social hygiene. And that picture there that shows the diversity of the IWO. It shows Romanian, Italian, Jewish, Ukrainian. What happened? Ukrainian, Hungarian, Finnish, Polish, Carpatho-Russian, Russian, Czechoslovak sections of the IWO in Detroit at a meeting in 1943. In addition to all this, the workers must have and must do everything to get adequate unemployment and social insurance. Organized efforts of the workers to achieve these needs are as necessary for the achievement of economic security as efforts to provide mutual benefits. The support of such organized efforts is therefore as much the duty of a worker fraternal organization as it is the payment of mutual benefits. IWO, this is a news article, plans mass X-rays to be held next Sunday. This was in the local newspapers. And remember, it was a mass organization. At one point, they actually had 200,000. It was more than 155,000. There it shows you members of the executive committee of a branch, number 5 of the IWO, who are in charge of arrangements for the finding program pictured above. Okay.
I'll finish this. The International Workers' Order recognizes this duty. Therefore, it will organize its life, its activities, and its services with the aim of developing among its members workers solidarity and unity as the first necessity for effective workers' struggles. It will carry on educational and cultural work designed to break down the artificial barriers of race, creed, and color which now divide the workers. As far as it is within its power, it will endeavor to win its members for participation in the efforts of the workers to end their economic insecurity. By such efforts, the IWO, everywhere and at all times, shall make itself a part of the forces that make for the continuous improvement of the living conditions of the workers. And a really quick note, this is exactly the mission statement, or at least we modeled our mission statement on this statement for the Nationalities Department of the PCUSA. Powerful stuff. Okay, and we'll have Comrade read this section, a most important effort, African American organizing.
In the 1930s, the IWO continued to stress work among the Negro masses and most important effort. Preparing special propaganda folders to help organize and enroll Black members, IWO organized Lewis Thompson Patterson, married William Patterson in 1940, to found Black and white croppers as well as industrial workers, respective to their message, because the order offered tangible relief in times of crisis. She helped organize them into IWO lodges in Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Tennessee, and other parts of the South. African Americans in the order, too, championed Social Security, with the Baltimore Afro-American provingly publicizing an IWO conference on Social Security. Other Black organizations were joining the IWO at this conference, and the paper urged its Black readership to support the order's drive for this legislation. During the order's reorganization in World War II, a Black Douglas Lincoln Society was founded to join the organization's ethnic societies. The interracial intent of the IWO was attractive enough to enfold Black Muslims in places such as Cleveland and New Haven. These members expressed their appreciation for the organization's racial equality and low-cost insurance policies available without discrimination. The IWO made a special appeal to Negro members and supported Negroes in Major League Baseball, the anti-poll tax amendments, anti-lynch legislation, and civil rights program. Promotion of these issues could be seen not only as the Black groups, but in the IWO's other organizations. The IWO came to the defense of the Scottsboro Boys, Black Alabama teens sentenced to death for alleged rape of white women.
Women in the International Workers' Order. Women from all ethnic backgrounds found leadership within the IWO. Louise Thompson Patterson, for example, became an IWO vice president in 1938 after organizing interracial IWO lodges among Deep South sharecroppers and other workers. Helen Vrabel became president of the Slovak Workers' Society. In 1951, Russian immigrant and IWO member Klara Danov faced deportation proceedings after the order had been labeled a subversive organization by the Attorney General. In an era when disseminating birth control information was still criminalized as pornography, the IWO was ahead of other medical facilities in providing working women with quality health care. The IWO was responding to the demands of women workers. Even in smaller cities, women of the IWO made access to birth control and better maternal health care central demands. In 1932, the South Slavic Women's Educational Club of Cudahy, Wisconsin, passed a resolution on protection of motherhood and childhood, declaring information on birth control is being withheld from working-class mothers by the capitalist government in order to guarantee a large labor supply for further exploitation. The Emma Lazarus Federation of Jewish Women's Clubs, ELF, a progressive women's group, grew out of the Emma Lazarus Division, founded in 1944 by the Women's Division of the Jewish People's Fraternal Order of the International Workers' Order, IWO. Formed to provide relief to wartime victims, but especially to combat anti-Semitism and racism to nurture positive Jewish identification through a broad program of Jewish education and women's rights. The Emma Lazarus Division attracted a membership of leftist, largely Yiddish-speaking women, many of the immigrant generation. The Emma Lazarus Division became a financial supporter of the Sojourners for Truth and Justice, an African-American women's group combating racism and segregation at home and imperialism abroad.
And sorry, just a quick correction. So the Emma Lazarus Federation of Jewish Women's Club, that is not connected with the IWO right now. That's just a separate organization that I believe is still around today. But the Emma Lazarus Division is indeed was a part of the IWO. That's all.
Thank you, comrades. We're going to go to our next discussion round.
Okay, so all of this is dealing essentially with identity politics. And identity politics are all the rage nowadays. And that begs the question of what's the difference between the way that like the two-party system or the bourgeoisie in general deal with identity politics and the way that the old party or we deal with identity politics. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see some hands went up. So General Secretary Joe Washington, did you want to respond?
Yeah, the difference, of course, is class. It's a class analysis. When the bourgeoisie talks about identity politics, they ignore class entirely. When we talk about issues which certain minorities face, we recognize those issues as being downstream from the basic contradiction of class. So, these issues are rooted in dividing the working class along whatever lines they can be divided. And so that's basically the difference.
Thank you, General Secretary Joe. Secretary Emeritus Angelo, did you want to respond as well?
Yes, I did. When we talk about it, that's why I am not opposed to identity politics. The New Left talks about it, and those that are opposed to the ultra left doesn't like identity politics. So the two of them are on the same side. When we talk about identity politics, we so bringing unity. That's the key word. We want to bring unity to all the different groups under the banner of working for the working class, supporting the working class. That's the difference. So we support LGBT, but we don't support LGBT to fly planes like men do and bomb people in Iraq, or sitting on the board of directors of General Motors, and it's a woman instead of a guy. No, it's not us. No, we're talking about the workers. The straight workers and the gay workers have more in common than they have division. And that's our job, to explain and to show that. Black worker has more in common with a white worker on the assembly line than he does with a black boss.
60 seconds.
Says it's that simple. So a Jewish worker has more in common with other workers that are not Jewish than he does with his boss, who happens to be a capitalist and happens to be a Zionist. And that's what Zionism is all about. All Jews come together, whether you're poor or rich. That kind of nonsense. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Angelo.
What was that you said the IWO was distributing that people at the time called porn?
That was referring to birth control. And Comrade, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I was just going to say it was information on birth control is all.
And Comrade, have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very interesting that the first groups that ever addressed the concerns of minorities or so-called identity politics were working class and communist groups. And nowadays we have a lot of, I guess, right-wing groups, even groups that call themselves working class oriented, that are very opposed to appealing to minority groups. When the real problem is that when the CPUSA, they used to have mass organizations for all of these different groups. And once they took those away, it left a vacuum for all these other non-working class oriented groups to take over the struggle for minorities.
Thank you, Comrade.
So a lot of this material, it is hard to find the primary sources of the IWO. You have to go to archives of libraries in New York, it seems. And while we would love comrades here, if they ever have a moment in New York to make it to those, please let me know in the Nationalities Department. I would love your help because we really would appreciate that. But there have been some academics that have written about this. They don't come from our background, but the best book that I found was A Road to Peace and Freedom, and it's by Robert M. Zecker. And he has a lot of this information that, like, a lot of the facts really good. But his conclusion is, well, the IWO, really left the CPUSA kind of left the IWO to their own vices. They left them kind of decentralized, which there is some truth to that, because if you read the political affairs issue that I was bringing up earlier, you do see that. But I mean, nonetheless, it's a good book because it does have a lot of factual stuff. Real quick, on the whole thing about identity politics, that is important to think about for today, what's going on when it comes to things like Black Lives Matter, or even with the ceasefire movement for Jewish, not in our names. It's never connected to class. And what we see what happened with the Histadrut in Israel, where they actually
90 seconds.
went against the whole idea of a general strike. It's because even the union did not connect it to class. And that's, I think, our job is to make those groups connected to class. That's all.
I actually had a conversation today based off of this. Somebody was bringing up, someone I'm friends with on Facebook was bringing up going to the KGB bar in New York City. It's supposed to be a Soviet themed bar. And that building was actually where the KGB bar is located. It was actually the building for the Ukrainian organization.
That's right.
IWO.
That's right. That's right.
And somebody, when they brought it up, I just mentioned that you know, that location, they went full Slava Ukrainian after the special military operation started in 2022. And I went on to say this happened because of the abandonment of these mass organizations and these communities. And that when the communists break themselves away from it, we leave it open for the nationalists and the fascists to take over and
60 seconds.
and get hold in these communities where we would have had it otherwise.
Thank you, comrades. If there are no other hands, we'll go on to our next section now. Our next section is going to be the Popular Front and the IWO's campaign. The Popular Front and the IWO's campaigns. With the U.S. entry into World War II, the IWO did everything it could to aid the Allied war effort, establishing an IWO Frontline Fighters Fund, FLFF, to send care packages to American GIs and orchestrating campaigns by their Slavic members to deliver war relief to Poland, Czechoslovakia, and the Soviet Union. Many IWO members were instrumental in the creation of the American Slav Congress, ASC, an organization of organizations that united various Slavic groups in support of the war effort. The Slav Congress, like the IWO, pushed for the opening of a second front to take some heat off the Soviets, had plenty of praise for the Red Army victories such as Stalingrad, and advocated an enduring Soviet-U.S. friendship. And you can see one of their papers right there. Looking at this, it looks like, I believe this is Slovak, but I might be wrong. And during World War II, patriotic American icons were used in appeals to ethnic group members to buy war bonds and to help the fight for freedom. The IWO combined ethnic particularism with American patriotism throughout the war. And a couple other examples here. You have the Frontline Fighters of the International Workers Fund. They sent care packages to American and Allied soldiers, but also raised money to purchase tanks for the War Department. And in 1942, a campaign in English and Yiddish reported on the $100,000 raised by the JPFO, the Jewish People's Fraternal Order, for the purchase of 10 tanks. Saltzman hoped to have the tanks named for Jewish heroes and the IWO itself.
A people's culture. The International Workers' Order carried out on the work of the Communist Party, which likewise sought a space in which recreation would develop a transformative class consciousness. With its commitment to union and civil rights activism, the International Workers' Order offered more to its members than life insurance. But when they put down their picket signs, members could also, if they liked, spend almost all their leisure time at their local IWO lodge. A wide array of recreational activities was on tap to fill every hour of a Workers' Day class-conscious fun. The pages of the International Workers' Order publications, such as The Spark and The New Order from the early 1930s, illustrate how comprehensive the organization's social network could be. reporting on amateur dramatic societies, mandolin orchestras, and workers' choirs, as well as youth branch members attending summer outings such as boat rides, swimming parties, or trips to communist summer camps like Camp Gay-Daggett and Camp Kinderland. Lodges hosted interesting programs of song and poetry, talks on current events, and drama festivals where they collegially competed against other theater troops. They held costume balls and picnics and competed in international workers' order sports leagues in basketball, baseball, football, and even tennis. Classes were offered to sportsmen and sportswomen in gymnastics, tumbling, wrestling, and boxing. IWO lodges screened films and then discussed their class-conscious messages. They sponsored folk dancing troupes, art classes, and essay and fiction contests for aspiring writers. The IWO's magazines themselves were outlets for members looking to break into working class journalism. Members showed up at lodges then not only to collect accident pay, visit a dental clinic, or buy life insurance. The hours of the week were filled with working class fun. The Cervantes Fraternal Society supported a youth baseball league called the Luis Olmo League, a concert by the flamenco dancer Trini Romero at Carnegie Chamber Music Hall. The Slovak Workers' Society, SWS, of Detroit also slated sports teams, fielding a bowling team in 1947. SWS lodges held a bazaar to benefit Ludovic Denik, the SWS publication. The Jewish People's Fraternal Order set up a youth camp called Camp Kinderland in the Jewish Children's School and memorialized the Warsaw Ghetto martyrs on the anniversary of the uprising. In 1941, Paul Robeson shared the bill with the Radishev Russian folk dancers on the IWO Day at the Civilian and National Defense Exposition. In 1950, the Jewish People's Fraternal Order and the Douglas Lincoln Society turned out in droves, at least 16,000, for a Robeson concert demanding an end to segregation and enactment of an anti-lynching bill. That year, Robeson teamed up with the JPFO and Michigan Slav Congress to raise funds to send the children of Willie McGee to Camp Kinderland. And here's some of the publications. The Fraternal Outlook, International Workers' Order, January.
All right. Thank you, Comrade. All right. And with that, we'll now go to our next discussion round.
I'm glad that we're having this class, because if we didn't have this class, I don't think anybody else in America is having this class. I know we've had this class before, but International Worker Order is unknown to everybody, basically. I've never heard anything about it in school, not even a slight mention or anything. But, you know, that shows you the ruling class. I mean, they control education and everything. But this is stuff that should be taught to kids. A lot of people don't even know where they came from at this point. You know, I'm second generation Polish / kind of Polish and Russian, but that's all I gotta say, pretty much.
Thank you, Comrade.
Okay. I was just wondering, like, how there were so many like comprehensive like programs that IWO was offering. Like, were those funded just through dues, or like how was that funded? And did they have like organizations that partnered with them to give like discounted medical services, or like how did that work?
So the way the insurance systems and other those worked is every member paid into, but instead of that fund going towards like shareholders' pockets or building more capital out of that, that basically went to assisting everyone, to where when someone needed the services, that the fund provided, they would have access to those funds. And Comrade, did you want to elaborate some more on that?
And they also had like kind of like how you have like brackets in your taxes. They had this similar process where if you could only afford this much, then you could give that much. And in certain times, they had like I said, unemployment, but it wasn't like you could just walk in and be like, hey, I want unemployment and I don't have a job. They had rules for that where, it was insurance. It was the benefit for everyone there. I would look at that book, A Road to Peace and Freedom. If you want more information, it's got a lot. That's all.
Thank you, Comrade. Comrade Angelo, you have the floor.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Everyone listen carefully. We had our own music culture. Most people don't even know this. It was something called Hootenanny. Are you here? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. The Hootenanny movement was started by the communists because it was based on folk dancing. Folk dancing. So I knew party members who were older who would teach at the Progressive Center. We had our own centers, by the way. It was a real movement. We had our own building. It was a Progressive Center, and we would have teaching folk dancing and there would be folk dances on Saturday night. And I went to one when I was 13. It was a whole new experience. The Hootenanny was a big thing. It was based on American music. It was an American national core to it. And that was the music. We had a magazine called Sing Out, Singout, Sing Out. And the editor was Irving Sibler. If anyone remembers that name, he wrote the book on Kampuchea that New Outlook is selling. Irving Sibler. So we had a whole movement. We had our own camps, summer camps, and every cabin was named after a left-wing person. There was the Paul Robeson cabin. I remember that. And then there was the Harriet Tubman cabin. So our children were inculcated with our views. It was amazing. That's it.
Thank you, Comrade Angelo.
So they mentioned Camp Kinderlin in there, and Camp Kinderlin, as many of you are aware, still exists to this day. It is no longer associated with the Communist Party nor the IWO, but myself and Comrade Angelo actually attended that event at the 100th anniversary. We watched this video of this lady who's been in the movement. I mean, probably longer than Angelo's been in it, and they would actually be rivalries. Like, remember the workers' order? They had their own camp as well, and they would kind of bully each other. And we remember watching this video where they were on a canoe, and the workman order, youth came over and said, "Well, if you love the Soviet Union so much, why don't you go move there?"
She said, "Yeah, why don't you take the hammer and sickle?"
Right.
She said, and our people who were young at the time, they were 16, 17, said, "I'll take that hammer and sickle and shove it up your blank."
That's right.
And I was the only one there clapping. I was clapping when I heard that.
I was sitting right next to him, and he was the only one clapping, and it was great. Yeah.
Thank you, Comrade. All right, we will now go to our final discussion round section, and that section will be read by our General Secretary, Comrade Joe. You have the floor, sir.
Destruction of the International Workers' Order. Repression from 1944 to 1950. In 1944, the HUAC, which was the House Un-American Activities Committee, began to publicly call out the International Workers' Order as a communist-affiliated organization. Special committee said the IWO was a, quote, huge patronage machine furnishing positions for a host of communist functionaries who serve as the party's controlling commissars within the organization, unquote. In 1947, the U.S. Attorney General placed the International Workers' Order on its list of subversive organizations. The New York State Insurance Department moved to liquidate the IWO in 1950 on charges that its large cash reserves, quote, would be surrendered to the Soviet Union by the IWO in the event of war. I'm not sure what that page on the right is. Conrad, could you remark on that?
Yes. So this is something that was issued by the IWO's executive committee in light of the fact that the Supreme Court of the state of New York moved to liquidate the IWO. And this kind of gives a breakdown of it as the IWO is a fraternal benefit society incorporated in New York in 1930. The IWO is comprised of over 1,600 lodges throughout the United States. Its membership of the present proceeding was at 162,000. It has over $6 million in assets. It has in-force insurance accounting to more than 110 million. And do remember this was back during the 1950s, so this is a lot more money then. And it kind of identifies itself and then mentions that in May 1950, the superintendent of insurance of the state of New York instituted a proceeding to liquidate the IWO and dissolve its existence. And after a 10-week trial before the New York Supreme Court, Justice Henry Clay Greensburg handed down an opinion on June 25th, 1951, ordering the IWO liquidated. And the first appeal will take place in the appellate division of the New York's Supreme Court.
Thank you. Disbanding. In 1951, the state of New York took legal action against the IWO on the grounds of being too close to the Communist Party USA. This case dragged out for 4 years against the backdrop of McCarthyism in the United States. Even during these tough times for the IWO, they were still providing necessary services and were still thousands of members strong. In 1954, the International Workers' Order finally came to an end when it was disbanded by the order of the State of New York. Legacy of the International Workers' Order. The IWO continued the legacy of the language federations of before and furthered the solidarity between the working class of the different ethnic and cultural communities of the U.S. The removal of the services provided through the IWO highlighted the necessity for better insurance coverage for the working class, especially ethnic communities. Camp Kinderlin, originally ran by the IWO, survived McCarthyism and still operates today as a Jewish summer camp. It has been suggested that the mutual aid concept behind the IWO could be applied to gig economy workers since they have no employer-provided benefits as they are considered independent contractors. And today, Party of Communists USA is working to rebuild many of the organizations which are founded in the International Workers' Order, as well as newer formations along the same lines, including the Asian American Friendship Congress, the United Native American Society, the United Jewish People's Fraternal Order, and the Cervantes Fraternal Society, as well as coming up the Irish American Connolly Council, the American Slavic Congress, and many, many more to come in the future.
Right. Thank you. We will go to our final discussion round now. And then just a note about that liquidation. Basically, New York State ordered the IWO to be liquidated. Its assets were split among a bunch of private insurance companies. People who were formerly on IWO coverage suddenly had hi, I'm your new insurance provider, and I'm private enterprise. So expect your rate heights to go up and your services to go down as such.
Okay. I was wondering if you're going to revive the IWO as an organization in general.
It would be great to revive the IWO in general. That would be a definite long-term goal because the IWO provided insurance and other services to people. And nowadays you would need a lot of capital to get on that. Also as well, the IWO was founded from a bunch of different organizations for different ethnic groups that had their own base before they were all amalgamated together in the IWO. So you could kind of say we're doing it a little bit in reverse to where we're trying to start the different organizations of it first again, instead of all the different organizations being established already and coming together.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Comrade Angelo, Emeritus Secretary, you have the floor.
I want everybody to know that this is a period that we were living in at the time. We had a school, a 6-story building in Manhattan on 6th Avenue. You know what that is? That's prime real estate. 6 stories. The bottom floor was a cooperative cafeteria. You went in there to eat. The rest of it was part of a Jefferson School for Social Research. It was the party's mass school, like the People's School is here. The Jefferson, but I had classes. People went there after work. Workers went there, classes on trade union organizing, tenants organizing, all kinds of those kind of classes. They lost that building. The party lost that building at this period, the same period, for the same reason. The other thing we lost was our newspaper. We had a daily newspaper that came out 6 days a week. It was called the Daily Worker. Okay. It ended at the same period, 1949, same period, 48, 49. So, and the last of all was the Korean War was it going on in 1950, 51, and the Rosenbergs were executed. So put all those things together and you'll see that the fear that what was going on in this country, the anti-communist witch hunt, that was a witch hunt. Okay, that's all I wanted to just give you the whole picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Angelo.
And just to continue what you were just saying, Comrade, I believe it was, I think the Department of Insurance of New York brought up the case. And it just makes you wonder, you know, this was actually a problem for the capitalists, this whole mutual benefit society. It's just something to think about, that this wasn't just trying to get them to go away. It actually, well, it was trying to get them, it actually hurt the capitalists, I guess their pocketbooks. That's all.
Well, it's for me, not for thee.
I know that the IWO was established in 1915, and is not related to the International Workingmen's Association, but I would like to hear what would be someone else's perspective on like the through line from the IWA to the formation of IWO. I know that you had a lot of progressives in the International Workingmen's Association that would go on to form various organizations that eventually become
60 seconds. I think the best answer I can give, at least, it's a combination of that time period during the 1910s, 1920s with the Soviet Union forming. There were a high amount of class consciousness among different worker groups. There were all those mutual aid societies that were going on. And especially with the formation of the Soviet Union, there was a lot of amalgamation and coming together of different groups and even different parties, like the two different communist parties, Communist Workers' Party and Communist Party, that came together to form the Communist Party USA after their meeting in Moscow. But for a definite answer, I really could not say, to be honest. And if anyone's got a different answer, feel free to chime in. Okay. All right. Well, if there are no other hands, we will go to our wrap-up section now. New Outlook Publishers is our sister publishing house, and for an update on that, I will turn the floor over to comrades.
Yes, thank you. Please visit our partner publishing house, New Outlook Publishers. You can find the website at newoutlookpublishers.store. We have a lot of great works there, and of course, purchasing books from New Outlook Publishers helps support the school. Our latest release is Communism versus Fascism by William Z. Forster, and that came out during this class. So please check that out and other works. And once again, Purchasing books through New Outlook Publishers helps support the school. So please check out those works. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. And we will end on the Internationale tonight.
We watch the condescending saviors to rule us from a judgment hall. We